Hi guys! Okay, so I'm just sitting down to do a Spring Things watercolor tutorial and just making sure that all my settings are good. You can see everything okay. Awesome. So today the plan is just to kind of go through this splash page here that I added to the group and printed off. The goal is just to kind of go through it like sketchbook style a little bit and show you guys a little bit about my technique and sort of how I achieve things when I'm doing small work, and really like about kind of color and the push and the pull of the water and how to sort of take advantage of that surface tension and that beautiful color that watercolor can have. Obviously, inherently in the name watercolor, our main ingredient is really the water, and making sure that the water kind of behaves the way that you want it to is sort of one of the greatest challenges, I think, of painting in watercolor. So I had a few requests on the AMSA page as well as on my personal page, and so I thought that the berries idea was really cute. I also picked out some sort of hawthorn berries here. I was thinking about maybe trying some rose hips as well, so I might use kind of some of this assorted greenery as a background for some rose hips that I want to do, and then some florals. Florals are definitely something I still find challenging and have difficulty with, but we're going to do kind of like a basic like tea rose, probably like an aerial view from the top. And so it'll just be a matter of layering strokes kind of in a circle and then adding more color as we go. So I've taped my page down. I have one of my plexiglass inserts from one of my IKEA frames. They work awesome. This is the size I work in usually when I'm doing any kind of a splash page, because that way if I go to frame it afterwards, I've taped off the edges just a little bit on this edge here, but if I frame it afterwards, I have a few options of how I want to center it, because I've gone a little bit outside of the immediate window of the matting. So these are kind of some ideas, and then before I went live, I was just starting to play around with some of my berries just to get a feel, and I felt pretty good about how the paint was laying down and some of my color choices, and so I kind of stopped because I thought, well, I should just do it for you guys instead. So I'm going to start with just a couple of blueberries, and I just grabbed kind of one of the really generic blue colors, and I added just a little bit of indigo to kind of deepen it up a little bit. You could definitely, if you wanted a more stylized or like not fake look, but like more of a crayon box look, you could totally go for something a bit more lighter, or more pastel or playful if that's your style. I'm kind of trying to keep it true to what I have in the picture here. I also have a few different sets of water because I wanted to show you guys some of my mixing. So I have my kind of main rinse off here for my brushes, and then I have a secondary one here that I'm going to keep cool, kind of like a light gray shade or blue shade. So as I'm rinsing my brush, I might rinse it in this one, and I might rinse it up here, just depending on what colors I'm using. And then this one I keep totally clear, because when you're mixing colors, when you're adding water into your color, you don't want to mix in mud always. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you want a bit of a neutral tint, and so whatever color this water gets to is sometimes helpful for making the color look a little bit more natural versus more bright. And today we want the colors to be quite bright because that's the goal of this sort of Spring Things page. So I'm keeping one totally clear so that when I'm mixing with my colors, I'm not going back into that water, I'm mixing up here instead. Hope that makes sense. I was also thinking I may want to do some text or something on top afterwards, so I kind of put out a pencil here for myself and a ruler, because I thought if I laid some lines down for myself that I could do like spring has sprung or something like that kind of on top in ink after, on top of some of my watercolor. So I was going to lay down some just really, really light pencil marks for myself and just give myself a couple of lines like that. And that way, if I change my mind and I don't like it and I don't really want to do text on top afterwards, I don't have to. I can just leave it. But I thought, at least if I lay the lines down, I have an idea. So this one is kind of upright. I'm kind of going to keep mine a little bit more landscape instead of portrait. And I'm also going to, because I might do text depending on how I go, I'm going to kind of concentrate most of my action to the outside edges here so that I can leave the inside for some of that decorative part if I want to. So let's start. I'm going to start, I think, with some of the berries here, and I do have my notifications turned on here. Hi Mary, so I can see comments and stuff like that as well. So if anybody has a question about any of my supplies today or the palette I'm using, then I can answer questions as I go too. So I also have some liquid frisket here, which we've worked with in some of the other tutorials, and basically this is a masking fluid that acts as a bit of a resistance. So if I lay this down, or if I wanted to do, let's say that wording, I could even lay it down in the liquid frisket and then do my entire page and then pull it up afterwards, and it would be blank basically. So that's an option. I have a moldable eraser up top here, so if I wanted to erase those lines later I can, but I digress. So I'm going to dig in with some of my blueberries. I liked these ones here, and that was about as small as I could get them, and I don't mind that size too much, so I'm just going to dig right in. And I'm going to just kind of let the water move. I'm going to keep it darker on one side, and then just leave that little window of light on the one edge of the blueberry. Grab a little more of my color and kind of dot that back in. Here we go. Doesn't have to be perfect. I know that blueberries are round. Get them as round as you can, and then just move on to the next one. It's not a big deal. And if some of them are lighter and some of them are darker, that's great. You can fill some of them in completely if you want to. I did with these ones, and I kind of liked the way that those turned out because not all of them were totally uniform. Add in a little bit more color to that guy just to give him a bit of pop. And anywhere where, see where the water is kind of pooling on that bottom edge. Hey Mom, my mom's watching, which is nice. Anywhere where that water's pooling, that's gonna stay. So the way that it dries, you'll kind of see on these blueberries that I did here, you can see a little bit of that dappling effect in the berries. That was where water had pooled. So it was a little bit more wet there and had a little bit higher concentration of color. So I did some blueberries on that corner. I'm going to do just a few up here just to kind of balance out the page. And who knows, I might change my mind and kind of want to put them somewhere else later too, but I don't want to overwhelm my whole page with blueberries and blueberry leaves for now, so I'm just going to do a couple on this side just to give it some balance, right? So that I'm not... you can kind of see here how they did like a cluster, strawberries in the middle, and a few lemons. I kind of like the lemons too. We'll see if I get to them. I did that other lemon tutorial, so I'm kind of eager to get to some of the flowers. And on that note, I may actually start laying down some of my leaves. You can see in this composition that this person did, the leaves were probably laid down first, and then they inserted the berries in between, and that's so you have enough room. Pardon me. You want to have enough room to kind of have all of these elements in here without having it to be too much overcrowding. So if I lay down my leaves first, I have a good idea of what I have mapped out and left over for myself. I really like this little hawthorn berry too, and I think the blueberries are actually kind of stunning, and wild blueberries in Alberta is a very provincial thing that's, you know, kind of cool, and same with the hawthorn. So I might just do some of those because the orange and the blue are going to look really nice together. So I'm going to do some leaves around the blueberries here and a few leaves here, and then I think I'm going to start with some of my hawthorn berries on this side. And correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody knows what hawthorn berries are and has seen them recently in the wild and those are not hawthorn berries, then just let me know. So I'm going to mix up some of my orange over here for those berries. Kind of get that color. I added a little bit of this kind of rusty red color in, and then I'll add some of my Azo orange back in. And I've got a bit of red here too, so when I want to darken those berries up, I have some options. Now for the greens, I kind of, this is a palette I used for the lemon tutorial, and I actually haven't touched it since. I'm going to switch out my brushes. I've been using a tiny one. I'm going to switch up to a little bit of a bigger brush. These are actually like just a cheap brush that I got. So these are not expensive. The thing about cheap brushes is they're not going to last you very long. The tips aren't very nice. They're okay. They work for what we're doing today, and I don't mind them at all, but I've been using them for classes for quite a while. And this is just your regular tapered round brush. And this is a size 6. So it's kind of right in the middle, but it's a really nice shape for leaves because you can almost just plop down here. I'll show you up here before I decide where I'm going with my other one. But I've got this pre-mixed palette of greens and yellows, and this will be very easily, I can turn this into a green and leafy palette basically for myself. And this is just dried paint, and you can use any kind of, like, when the watercolor dries, it's still good. So there's no sense in wiping this all down and wasting all of this color that I've already laid out for myself. It's totally usable. So I'm going to bring this back just so I have a reference for my strawberry leaves, for example. So just putting a few leaves off the top, letting them kind of pool. And you can see, really, as soon as I lay my brush down, it's almost the exact shape I need it to be for a leaf. And leaves are irregular. We want to, sometimes when we're doing this more illustrative style, we have this tendency to make everything kind of perfect and uniform, but leaves are inherently imperfect. They've got breakages in them, they've got weird lines, sometimes they're, not formed completely. So don't worry if your leaf has a little bit of extra character. See, that one already to me looks a little bit more natural than some of the ones that I did in the beginning. So start with that shape that the brush lays down for you, and then don't worry too much about branching out from there. So I'm kind of happy with that. That's cute. And then, in a strawberry leaf or strawberry patch, we've all seen it where we have these kind of long, spindly stems coming off. So, just be playful with it. There's no wrong way to do it. And I'm kind of just riffing a little bit, and you can see here it's not like a true green I'm using. I really shy away from using colors straight out of my palette, and I always add in a bit of brown or a bit of a natural tint so they've got a bit of a natural look to them. In that same breath, though, having a different shade of green is always really nice, so I'm going to go in and actually just add a little bit of green to this yellow and brighten it up. And now I've got sort of these nice 2 different tones to play with. One's more of a spring green and one's a little bit more of like a winter green. And I'm just going to add a tiny bit of brown, not too much. That's too much there, but I'm going to put this up here for like a stem, or if I have a darker spot that I want to bring out in the leaf, I'll use some of that brown later. But I'm going to use just a little bit of this just to tone down how spring green this is. You see already, as soon as I add that brown to it, it kind of muddies it up just a little bit and makes it more natural. And now actually I have a bit of green in my brown, which isn't a bad thing either. So that's kind of what my idea was with the leaves there. I'm going to kind of go in now, and it looks like with the blueberry leaves, they just kind of did these nice leaves. So I'm going to use a lighter green, I think, on the blueberry leaves. And you can totally overlap. You don't have to leave tons of white space. You can. It's nice to have a mix though. So here I'm going to just kind of go over top of the blueberries and leave these kind of nice little leaves there. I kind of like, see how that one has like a bit of a nicer flow to it? I didn't fill it in completely. It's not perfect. I'll add some more suggestions of leaves down here. Obviously the paint is there, so it's not gonna complete that full leaf, but can kind of go like this, and maybe some smaller leaves as well. Little stems kind of in between. Boom. It's a great start. And then I'm going to take a bit of this darker color, just dot it in while it's still wet. Give myself a bit of kind of shading where the shadows would go more naturally in between, and just a bit of dappling there. I'm not super happy with this. It's a bit blotchy and a little bit big, but whatever. I think it'll layer up really nice later, so I'll let that dry and do the same thing over here. I can see that my blueberries have dried a little bit more, which is really nice. And I'm just gonna pay a little more attention to this leaf, and that's because if I'm gonna put text here, it's gonna be kind of right on the edge of where my text is gonna go. So I'm gonna kind of play around a little bit more, let your brush do the work in your wrist, right? You don't need to control the outcome too much. It's okay if you don't get that perfectly tapered leaf. And leaves, you know, generally do cluster a little bit too. So you could do a little cluster of a few, add a bit of that darken. And I'm just going to kind of dapple it in the background there to give the illusion of leaves without actually having to do that work. There we go. I'm just layering some of those colors on. A little bit of my blue got in that leaf. I'm not really too worried about it. Good. So those are my blueberries to start. You can already see down here, this one's dry. I'm going to add some more color in, pump that up. Good. Now I'm going to go in with my hawthorn berries. Now for this one, I'm going to lay the berries down first. And this one's a little bit more tricky because it's got some kind of foreshortening a little on the berries. So I'm going to go really light here. I'm actually going to use this little dish just so I can get it quite watery and light to start. I don't want it to be too dark. And I'm just going to do like this little sprig or this little guy here. So I'm just going to do like a round berry, leave that just as it is, do a longer one, kind of fill that in, and then my last one. And I'm just kind of using this as if it were a pencil. And that's all I'm going to do for now. And then this one I'm going to turn it so it's kind of this way. Little berry like that. Little berry like that. And basically I'm just using those as placeholders like I did with the blueberries to start. Speaking of the blueberries, they've dried a little. I'm going to go back in with just a touch more color. Punch those up a little bit. Now that I've laid my leaves down, I can kind of add that next layer. And for this one, because it's kind of illustrative, I'm not really worried if this one bled into the leaf part a little bit, whatever. That's the kind of thing that is easily done with, you know, a cover up later. Let's say I don't really like this area, I could just add a couple more blueberries right on top of that leaf and it would cover it right up because the blue is going to be a lot darker than the green that's in the background. So I'm just going to leave that and let it be kind of playful. And this little berry guy I like, but I kind of want the shape a little bit more, so I'm just going to touch that up a little bit. There we go. And again, if I'm planning on going in with ink later, this is easily, a lot of these little, you know, quote-unquote mistakes are easily remedied. And there I just went and grabbed a bit more color, dotted it in. Watercolor wants to go wherever water is. You know, obviously it's inherent in the name, but you can just touch it in while it's still wet and it'll kind of spread in a nice little area. These are going to take a little longer to dry, however, but that's okay. So we've done a few berries. I think I'm going to go in and start doing a couple of flowers. So I was messing around with some yesterday. I really like these kind of muted tones for flowers. You know, they can be quite bright, but they can also be a little bit more muted. So I'll kind of show you up here before I go in on my page. And this is something I do quite often when I'm doing work like this, is I'll practice somewhere first and then I'll kind of go in after. So for the flowers, you can kind of just dance the color around like so. And really it's about the white. As much as we think that, you know, flowers are color, and they are, it's more about where the white is than anything. And again, we can go back in with ink afterwards and let our pen do some of the work, so don't worry too much about what the shape is like. Really, we're just layering these kind of curved, see how I'm just kind of sketching? I've focused an area in the middle that's going to be my center, and everything else just goes around the edges. Your flower is always going to be darker at the base where the least light is hitting it, over the top. So sometimes I'll make like this darker shade here, bring that in just at the bottom, because the light's going to hit the top of the flower more naturally. So I just kind of throw in a couple of things, and this happens a lot too when I do work. I'm like, oh, I'm really happy with this, and this is kind of feeling more strained. That's because we're a lot looser in our sketchbooks usually than we are when we're trying to do something quote unquote for real. So be mindful of that when you're working in your sketchbook, and be patient with yourself too. So I am going to use the same kind of muted floral tone, and I kind of liked the bushiness, and this to me is reminiscent of like a peony, something like that, which is a beautiful, more summer flower, I suppose, but this could also be a tea rose or something like that. You can see I've lost a bit of my white over here. That's okay, because it's at the bottom. We can add in some of this darker tone like I was mentioning, just to bring up that interest. You kind of want something in every part to be interesting, so if you lose some of that interest and some of that white, then try a different color, you know, try mixing in a little bit of purple or a little bit of blue or something like that, and mix it with the color that you've already been using. Don't go in with like this color blue and all of a sudden expect it to blend on the page, because it won't. But if you went in with something like this that's sort of adjacent to a pink, it would work. And it would blend okay, see? So always mix it in though, if you can, with what you've got. And that way you're derivative of the same color, but it's not exact. I like that little flower, and I think I'm going to do another one down here, but it's going to be a little lighter, because I want that one to kind of pull the focus, I think, of the page. So I'm just going to do a little smaller flower at the bottom, and then I'll do one more here that's a little darker, a little more pink. These could even be carnations, actually. Maybe that's the direction I'll go in. I think that's a more spring kind of tone. There we go. Awesome. Awesome. I'm feeling really happy about those. See how much white I left with these ones at the bottom? Like way more white than I left at the top one, which is totally fine. Like I said, that's forgivable with ink, but this is kind of the layering that we're looking for, and those really light strokes and not overworking it too much. So I'm gonna leave that. What else should I do? I was thinking maybe of doing a couple of strawberries, or maybe I'll do some raspberries down here. Now the way that I was kind of doing it up here is you can see that I used a more pink tone for the raspberries and then a true ruby red for the strawberries, and that was to sort of differentiate the color. I've used a bit of this pink color already with the flowers, so maybe I could do strawberries, or I was even thinking these cranberries, these wild cranberries are really neat. And the reason is I can use this sort of brighter cranberry color, wild cranberry color, and it'll look different than the rose color. So I'll have a little bit of variety in my page. Those hawthorn berries are just great though, I love them. But let's do a couple of cranberries, and cranberries being a little bit more uniform, I'm going to mix in a lot of water so I can push that around when I'm laying it down. There we go. And cranberries are pretty dark, so I'm going to use a lot of pigment there. Good. Just do little clusters of 3. Now this kind of has some symmetry, which is really nice, and I can punch up the asymmetry by doing the leaves afterwards, which will kind of naturally break things apart a little bit. Okay, now lastly, I think I might leave this corner for just leaves if I can. And so I'm going to kind of go into this study here of these little vines, and I'm going to use some of this yellowy color that I had picked up. I'm going to make a little bit more of it. And I'm using a lemon yellow here, and then just a little of my spring green. And again, I'm just going to mix in a bit of that brown. Just don't want it to be too punchy. I want it to be kind of a little bit more neutral. Now I've lost my brown, but that's easy to get back. Actually, I like this color better. This is kind of what I'm going for. So for this one, I'm going to do just like a sprig, I think. And I'm just going to do some little things coming off of it, almost like some really early lily of the valley. There we go, just for something a little different. And I'm not too worried about the sketchiness of the lines or the fact that they don't really layer as well. It doesn't really bother me. And I hit my cranberry down here, but that's fine. Just make it a little bigger. Good. Okay, I'm gonna go in. I think my hawthorn berries are doing okay. They're a little, you can see they're a little bit wet still, but I'm able to pick up some of that paint, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna pick up just a little of that pigment that I laid down. Good. Go back into my blueberries for a quick sec. Add a little bit more color on the bottom. Nice. Nice and punchy. Good. And that'll kind of dry really nice too. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my smaller brush and I'm going to work with these hawthorn berries. So these are kind of these long minty green spindly ones. I'm going to add a little of my China white to the base of this color here to get it that kind of milky color that we've got, and then we'll see how I do. So this was the one that I went from, so I'm just going to be mindful of my rose that's sitting up there and not worry too much about that. This one's just peeking out of the side, so I'm not going to cheat that. I'm going to try to stay true to that longer leaf there. Leave some of that white behind. And then I'm going to bring my brown back up here, actually. Whoop, that's a lot. Well, now I have stems for a little while. I don't want too much of that pigment, but maybe like there, 50%. Let's go with that. And then we're going to put this stem in. I'm not going to worry too much about the details. Again, this is kind of an illustrative, so I don't mind some of that bleeding. If I was doing something that was a little bit more true to form, I might not want that, but here I'm not worried. Add those stems in, and then we'll do some nice rounded leaves from this one. And that one now kind of creates a little bit of space in that corner. The two of those berries kind of bled into one another and I lost a bit of that definition, so I'm going to put in just some color on that one there. Good. Okay. Now I'm going to keep going with the leaves, I think, and carry them across the bottom. I like this minty color I had for the hawthorn berries. I think I'm going to use that with my roses as well to kind of give a suggestion of this kind of really washy, dainty color. Again, leaving lots of that white behind. We don't need to fill it in too much. Just dotting in some darker green in the bottom there, a little bit more pigment, a little bit more color, just to add in some interest. And then I'm going to use that darker green, I think, for my cranberries. And I'm even going to add just a bit of blue, just so it's a different color leaf again. We're kind of layering different colors, one on top of the other. And these cranberries look like they've got kind of these sketchy leaves, so I'm gonna do that just again for something a little different. And leaving some of that white in between. Again, if I'm going to go in with ink afterwards, all of this is easily kind of fixed if it's not feeling kind of as cohesive as you want it to be, or if some of the lines aren't where you want them to be. Try not to worry too much about that, because you can easily go over it afterwards, and sometimes everything looks better together as a whole than it does when you first lay it down. Like, I'm not happy with this blueberry leaf, but like I have lots of room basically to work with it. And I'm thinking now that this part is dry, I am going to lay another blueberry right on top. Just going to give myself some more color there. Make this one a little bigger. Make this guy a little louder too. There. Pretty. I'm happy with that so far. Okay. And now to fill in some of the other extra pieces. If we wanted to crowd it, we could. There's lots that they've done here that you could work with. I'm kind of enjoying working with some of these vines and leaves, so I'm going to keep working with that because I've got lots of paint here too. So I'm thinking I'm just going to bring up one of these and do kind of a, I don't know, a more traditional leaf shape. And again, I'm just using the exact shape of my brush to pull in those leaves really easily because my brush shape is already exactly what I need it to be. So it's just about laying that color down where we need it to and still leaving myself enough room to go in the center with that work if I want to. I'm going to work with the rose now up here. Again, this leaf is going to be a little bit more on display, so I'm going to try to leave white space underneath if I can. Like that. And just sort of dance another leaf over into that corner. Good. Awesome. And you can see there's some bleeding in some areas where it's overlapped, and that's fine. And just punch up that color again, give it a little bit more pigment, because as it dries, you're losing some of that pigment as well. Just gonna pop on our live feed and see if we have any questions. Oh, Spencer's watching. Jeff's watching. Adam's watching. Russ is watching. Hi, guys. Yeah, so I'm gonna go in, just do a little bit of punch up on that leaf there, because that one dried kind of funny. Maybe add one more in the background. Okay, 2 more, just to give it some definition. And these don't have to necessarily go anywhere. Sometimes they're disconnected, sometimes they're not. I'm gonna dapple in some of this color underneath for a bit of interest, because it's gonna be a nice layer, I think, on top of my blueberries there. A little bit here as well, a little bit over here, and a little bit of this darker green too. Good. Great. Well, I'm really happy with that. The only thing I was thinking of is something for up there, but I kind of want to leave it a little bit more neutral. Maybe it's not worth messing with it too much. Berries and flowers and spring things. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with that, actually. And this pencil mark too, anywhere where the paint isn't, it should come off just fine. And I've left myself that little bit of room to kind of work with. Oh heck, I'm gonna do one more blueberry up here, just because it kind of looks like it connects a little bit. Nice. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Maybe one more little cranberry too. Oops. Very good. Now I'm getting to that point where I think I should call it, because if I overwork this too much, or if I make a mistake or something like that, I'm going to be unhappy with a piece that I was happy with. And this is something I struggle with a lot, is not going back into it too much, not overworking it too much, and trying to just leave some of those parts as is. Just adding a little extra color in there. There. I'm pretty happy with that. So now I'm going to go in and do some of my text. I think I'm just going to do some spring is sprung maybe, or something like that in the middle. Not really sure yet. I might wait a little while and let it dry, I think. But I have a nice card I could also send to somebody to say thank you. I could frame this and put a little bit of a saying in the middle. There's lots of really great options for where this could go and what it could do. So yeah, I might even just leave it for a rainy day so that I have something for myself. But here's my spring things tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that was fun. Yeah, again, I always have a scrapbook kind of beside me, and then I can play around with some of the ideas before I lay them down on a more permanent page. But I think that's everything for today. Again, I had a size 2, a size 6, and a size 7 brush. I've got my palette here, a couple extra waters. I have the liquid frisket if I needed it, which I didn't, and my ink pen for later. So I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys!